company becomes diwan. Now let's see what diwan is and how the East India Company became diwan. So on 12th August 1765, the Mughal emperor, they appointed the East India Company as the Diwan of Bengal. What is a diwan now? We need to understand. Diwan is the head of a particular estate. So the head or the supreme power of a particular state, city or estate, that power was known as the diwan. So the Mughal Empire and the emperors who were there on 12th August 1765, they appointed and they made sure that the East India Company, they became the Diwan of Bengal. So the actual event most probably took place in Robert Clive's tent. So how did it take place? Was there any function, big extravagant function? No. So it took place in Robert Clive's tent with few Englishmen. There were few Englishmen, probably the officers and governors at that time, and in the tent they signed a treaty. So apart from that, in the painting above, the painting that we saw in the last slide, we saw that it was an event shown as the majestic occasion. So it was not like that. What was done was, there was a treaty signed between the Mughal emperors and the British East India Company. So now this was taking place and the setting was not that grand. The painter was commissioned by Clive to record the memorable event in Clive's life. So what happened? The person who made that painting was appointed by Robert Clive, and this painter, he was accountable and responsible for making all the lifelong events of the Clive's life. So the grant of Diwani, the grant of that power, clearly was one such event in British history and imagination, which was very grand, big and majestic. That is why the picture has shown as very majestic painting. So as Diwan, the company became the chief financial administrator. So what are the responsibilities assumed by a Diwan? They had the financial responsibility and powers to administer the financial resources of that territory. Apart from that, now it had to think of administrating the land and organizing its revenue resources. So not just finances and revenue resources, they also had to administer the land. And land was used for various different purposes. There were industries, factories, agricultural lands, etc. So a trading company had to ensure that East India Trading Company had to ensure that it could buy the products it needed and sell what it wanted. So there were proper channels of trade and exchange of goods and commodities. They could buy the raw materials or whatever they needed and sell their products as well. Apart from that, over the period of colonial time, over the years, the company also learned that it had to move with some caution. It was not like that they could make reckless decisions. They had to be sensitive towards the needs and demands of the natives. Being an alien power, they came from outside, they were not natives. It needed to pacify those who in the past had ruled the countryside. There were a lot of people who used to rule those places, those countrysides. What about them? Because the people who were the natives, they had a sensitive attachment towards the previous rulers. So East India Company had to ensure that it could sensitize towards the natives. So apart from that, what was done? The authority and prestige could be met. The authority, prestige and power the earlier rulers had, they had to meet that as well. Those who had held the local power had to be controlled, but they could not entirely be eliminated. Since they were local rulers, they could not be eliminated because there was a sense of support from the people living there. So how was this to be done? How was this to be done that their power had to be controlled, but they could not be eliminated from the society? Let's see. In this chapter, we will see that only. How did the East India Company was successful in doing so? Now, revenue for the company. Now, if the British East India Company, they had to penetrate the Indian subcontinent, they had to settle down here. They needed sources of income and revenue. So, what were their sources of income and revenue? Let's see. So, even after getting the Diwani rights, the company saw itself primarily as a trader. It was just the exchange of goods and commodities. Nothing major thing was happening. They wanted large revenue. Revenue just does not come from trade or commodity merchandising, but it also comes from different other sources such as taxes, tributes, agriculture produce, etc. So They wanted large revenues, but they were not willing to set up a regular system of revenue collection or assessment. They did not want to establish a regular or obligatory system because that would just get public opposition. They tried to increase the revenue collection, purchase of fine cotton and silk. So in order to increase their revenue collection, increase their income, they started to purchase fine cotton and silk. The value of purchased goods was doubled within 5 years. So the value, it was doubled over the period of 5 years. Now the revenue collected from the area was used to finance that purchase. Okay. So position of Bengal's economy during the Diwani of the company. So how did the position, the power, the value of Bengal's economy, it changed during the period of the British Diwani? Bengal's economy was facing a deep crisis. So as we know, there was a very deep crisis. There were financial restrictions, financial crisis that the people of Bengal were facing. Artisans began deserting villages. They started to leave their villages because of low prices given by the company. The company, the traders, they did not used to pay the villagers for their work. So they started to leave those villages and move elsewhere. Peasants, the peasants who used to grow crops or used to work in the farms, they were not able to pay the dues demanded by the company. Artisanal products, the products made by artisans, was in decline. So there was a sharp decline in production of these products. Agriculture cultivation showed signs of collapse. So agriculture production in that particular area of Bengal, it was sharp declined. Why was that so? So a terrible famine. There was a famine. I am sure you must have studied about famine in geography. So it killed 10 million people in Bengal alone in 1770. So about 1/3 of the population was destroyed completely. There was a famine, there was a drought, there was lack of food and resources available. People started to fled the villages. There was no money, they did not know how to pay to the lords. They did not have money to feed themselves. So there was a famine in 1770. So a weekly market in Murshidabad. So now we will see a case study about Murshidabad. It was located in Bengal and there was a weekly market set up. We have weekly markets even now. I am sure you must know that in your respective cities there are markets which are specifically located on a particular day of the week or for a particular week in the month. So let's see. A weekly market in Murshidabad. Murshidabad is located in Bengal, was very flourishing. It was developing and it was very famous among the people. Peasants, artisans from rural areas. So the people who were living in villages and rural areas, they used to come regularly in order to trade, in order to sell their produce. So these markets were badly affected by this famine during that economic times. So as you can see this picture here, there are a lot of people, peasants, artisans who used to come and sell their produce. But during the economic crisis, this market, it had a sharp decline and it was destroyed.